All right, so we're going holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 18. Again, we're going holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 18. It's part 17. It'll be part 18. Part 19 is going to be a lot of parts here because we're not getting very far, as we see. Again, we're welcome. Holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 18. We're in verse 2. Still in verse 2. We'll be there for probably next number of weeks. And the Torah says, Vadber Shem Moshe Lemor, God spoke to the Jewish people saying, in verse 1 and in verse 2, Torah says, Deber b'nei Yisrael v'amart aleim ani Hashem Elokeichem. You shall say unto them, I am the eternal your God. That's what you're going to say to them. Right? You're going to say, I'm the eternal your God. So we saw before. Rashi says, spoke on Mount Sinai, right? I'm the one God says, I spoke on Mount Sinai. I'm the Lord your God. Kingship you accepted, right? You accepted my decrees. We spoke about that. Says Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, who organized all the Mishnah. He said it was manifest and known to him in the days of Ezra. They would ultimately revolt against the restricting sexual relations, right? Go figure. Tell them that certain people you can't be with or whatever, right? They're going to revolt. And he therefore came to them with a decree emphasized by the words, I am the Lord your God. Understand well who is that imposes this decree on you, i.e., who makes the decree? God himself, right? And God has the ability to give reward and to punish as well. So that's what Rashi over here says. It comes on Nor Chaim Kadosh, one of the great commentaries born a few hundred years ago. And we mentioned last week, one of the things he mentioned was again in verse 3. We're not going to get there today, probably not next week either. But in verse 3, it says, not go in the ways of the Egyptians, where you dwelt. Right? Don't do what they do. Don't go in the ways of the Canaanites. They're going to bring them there. Don't go in their ways. Very good. Now, the obvious question says, Dor Chaim Akadosh over here, we mentioned, spoke at great length last week, is the fact that God brought them there. God brought them there to the land of Egypt. Land of Egypt being tremendously impure, very good. Yeah, so the question was, he brought them there. He understood they were very immoral, right? It's very immoral, very immoral nation. Nonetheless, even though they were a very immoral nation, God put them there, right? God 100% put them there. So the obvious question, right? The obvious question is, if you put them there, why punish them? What did the Jews do wrong? You put them there, they sin. Well, what do you want from them? You put them in a place that is full of immorality. So says Dor Chaim Akadosh over here, says even though that's true, and I put you in a place not so good, where they almost got destroyed. They almost reached 49th level of impurity. Right? Very good. Or maybe not so good. Nonetheless, what does God say? I put you in such a place, don't go in their ways. But what do you mean? You put us in a place where people surrounding us are totally immoral. What do you expect? Right? What do you expect? What do you think the Jews are going to be? Choir boys? Living in Victorian England? I don't think so. Moshe Rabbeinu makes the claim, only Moshe Rabbeinu could make such a claim. In the book of Exodus, by the sin of the golden calf, what does Moshe Rabbeinu say? He says, God, you want to wipe them out? You wipe me out first. He says, you're not allowed to wipe them out. Why not? Why not? Because you made them wealthy. They came out of Egypt with great wealth. That was the prophecy. That God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, don't worry. They're going to come out. Jewish people are going to come out. They're going to see my power. They're going to see my might. They're going to see everything I've done. Right? Regardless, they're going to do what I say. Right? 100%, they're going to do as I say. But nonetheless, the fact that they saw my power and they saw my might. So, what's going to be? Right? What's going to be? So, Moshe Rabbeinu says, you made them wealthy. If you made them wealthy and they used their money, their wealth, and they made this golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu calls God out and says, it's your fault. You gave them wealth. And through wealth caused probably single greatest catastrophe in the history of man. Right? Probably next to Adam and Eve eating from the tree. Because when Adam and Eve ate from the tree, the only time in history the world was where Adam and Eve were before they sinned. Right? In other words, where the world was before they sinned was only Mount Sinai. After Mount Sinai, after a certain short amount of time, even though the Torah is not written in chronological order, if you go through the book of Exodus, you'll tell me many, many chapters later, I got the sin of the golden calf, very good. But it happened very shortly thereafter. And you'll tell me it was only the Abraham. It's only a mixed multitude, very good. So it's only a few thousand people. Right? But it wasn't really the Jews, the converts came out of Egypt, or came out from other places. Difference of opinion. So you say it's not all the Jews' fault. But see, Mr. S understood the Satan, evil inclination, whatever you want to call him. He understood if Jewish people go straight into the land, what's going to happen? He's gone. That's the end of the Satan. That's the end of the evil inclination, the angel of death. So what did he do? What did he do? The Medrash says he showed everybody Moshe Rabbeinu on a coffin as if Moshe died. They made a mistake in the day he was coming back. Because they made a mistake in the day he was coming back, they wanted an intermediary. They wanted some sort of intermediary. Now, you really think the Jews saw God face to face, Mount Sinai, whatever that meant. They either heard the first of the 10 commandments, they died because of the great experience, and then God brought them back to life, or they heard all 10 commandments, and they all died and came back to life. Difference of opinion exactly what happened. Right? Doesn't really matter for now. Right? But the point is, that they saw God face to face, whatever that means, on Mount Sinai, how could they give it in to the Abraham? How could they give it in to the mixed multitude? They also saw. They say they weren't such good converts. Okay. Right? We can argue that. Wherever they came from. But still, how, they're at such a high level. Such an unbelievably high level. But at that point, they could have gone straight into the land of Israel. That would have been the end of the evil inclination. Messiah would have come, finished. That's it. But obviously it didn't happen. Then you have the sin of the spies. But the Satan understood, if the world goes back to where it was before Adam and Eve sinned, and that's where we're trying to get the world for the Messiah to come. Well, on such a low level, Messiah will come either way. Right? Regardless of whether we get to such a high spiritual level or not, which probably not going to get to. But in either case, it'll come by hook or by crook. Either the Gemara says, everyone will be righteous, the Messiah will come, no problem. Or, and go the harder way. What's the harder way? God can put an evil king like Haman. He can put Mr. Haman up there as the king, or someone like him. Not him exactly. They'll put someone like him who have these evil decrees. And what's going to happen? The Jews will repent. You can have it either way. Right? So I'll tell you it's probably going to be the second way. Doesn't look like the first way to me. Right? But I am a pessimist in general. At least with certain things. Usually I'm an optimist in certain things, but it comes to this, very hard to imagine. It's going to be the first way. Everyone's going to be, thinking kumbaya, everyone's going to love the Jews, and all the Jews are going to come back, and very hard to imagine. Very, very hard to imagine. Right? Bottom line, without getting into this topic, is either, you're going to be an Orthodox Jew, or you will disappear. Right? There's just no way around it. Right? Intermarriage, assimilation, right? We've spoken about that quite a bit. So here's an amazing thing. The world could have been completed at that time. The purpose of the world done. And then what happened? The Medrash says, he showed Moshe Rabbeinu in a coffin. By showing him in a coffin, everyone panicked. And then you have the sin of the golden calf. Now, if you look at the verses, I remember, many years ago, went through the verses. You look at the verses, what does it look like? Adultery. Nothing to talk about. Straight explanation, not going to homiletics, straight explanation. What does it look like? Idolatry. That's the way it looks. The problem is, forget about homiletics, how we're going to interpret, we got a fundamental question. The Jewish people were on the biggest ride of their life right now. Decimated Egypt. Only people stupid like Amalek are going to start up with them. Right? They're the first nation started up with the Jewish people. Kind of hard to imagine, but okay, it's another issue. But what do you have? You have the Jewish people on the biggest roll of their lives. They never should have got out of Egypt. They decimated the entire country. Took all the wealth, destroyed all the property, food, right, etc. They got rid of their king. King had to watch everything. He became the king of Nineveh, right? It's like, here you're the king of the world power. Now it's like the king of Fiji. No offense to anyone who ever lived in Fiji, right? Grew up in Fiji or whatever. Pago Pago is the king of Pago Pago. Or even better, he's the king of Yukon territory. Anybody live in the Yukon territory? Except a few Eskimos? Wow, look at that. Got totally demoted. He was king of the world. He was the world power at that time. Totally decimated. So they saw miracles. They saw the miracles. They saw the miracles in the desert. They go to Mount Sinai. Saw the mannas. They go to Mount Sinai. Beautiful. Wow, I forgot. Split into the sea. They get to Mount Sinai. They see all these miracles. I want to tell me 3,000 people could be, could be significant people. They say they want to be part of the Jewish people. Okay. They want to be part. Very good. So let them join. This is the last chance to join at Mount Sinai. After that, well, too bad. Got to go through conversion, right? Doesn't matter what you would have done in your great-great-great-great-grandparents' generation, right? God goes to all the nations. They rejected the Torah. God comes to the Jewish people, right? Avodah Zarah to be the 3A. God goes to the Jewish people. You want the Torah? They say, sure. You want to know what's written in it? They say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do it, and then we'll hear what it's all about. Very good. So someone tells me many years ago, someone says, if I would have been in my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents' generation, I never would have rejected Torah. I said, well, that's beautiful. Nobody cares about you. No offense, right? Nobody cares. They rejected the Torah. The Jewish people accepted it. There was a certain amount of time a person had if they wanted to join the Jewish people. Really, the Ramchal says up until the time of Tower of Babel. But God had mercy even up until giving of the Torah. At that point, it was sealed off. Now you want to be part of the Jewish people? Very good. You got to join, right? You got to go through initiation rites, right? You have to go through conversion. That's it. So the person said, if I would have been there, I would have rejected Torah. Okay. So they couldn't understand why it should be. They have an obligation to do something on purpose to desecrate Shabbos. They said, oh, God doesn't want me to do that. So back and forth, and person kept saying, well, if I would have been there, I would have rejected Torah and all that. Very good. But finally, I said, okay, let me tell you the punchline. Let me tell you the bottom line here. The bottom line is, as the Gemara Sanhedrin says, that a non-Jew keeps Shabbos, right? Meaning like a Jew. Not that you make mistakes and you desecrate Shabbos. You do it on purpose. If you don't do it on purpose, death penalty. It doesn't belong to you. Anyone in the process of conversion has to break Shabbos. Right? Otherwise, it's death penalty. So the person says, I can't believe God will want me to do that. I said, okay, let me ask you. Let me be very, very, very clear. There are three signs that the Torah says belong to Jews and not to non-Jews. One of them is Shabbos, right? It's a sign between God and the Jewish people, very clear. One of them is circumcision, right? Bris Milah, as we call it. And what's the third thing the prophets bring down? Tefillin. why a non-Jew can't wear tefillin before they convert. They can learn how to put them on before, as long as no parchment in there. Okay. These three things belong ultimately and only to the Jewish people. Now, you got a non-Jew who doesn't want to convert, they still want to keep Shabbos. Now, there are maybe certain things you can do within the no-hide laws. Okay, right? Yeah, we could discuss that. There are certain things, but they're not refraining from any of the 39 categories. Like, they're not going to write, they're not going to use electricity, they're not going to do other things. That is going over the border, right? That is straddling the lines. Now, I would say that's the ultimate chutzpah that the non-Jews rejected Torah. Like, forget someone who's in conversion. We're not talking about that. Somebody who rejected Torah, right? If the nation rejected Torah, any nation rejected Torah, and now a non-Jew wants to participate, there are certain things they can do. Okay, they're limited, and they should be limited. Yeah, sometimes you get these super no-hides. They think they're almost Jewish, but they're not. They, oh, we do this, we do that, right? And something we can't keep Shabbos. Wink, wink. Well, you can't. If the Torah said, like, we're going to make very clear, the Karaites are going to be very happy. No oral tradition here. When the Torah says, literally, it's a sign between me and you, God says, me and the Jewish people. Remember, when God gives the Torah to the Jews of Mount Sinai, what's one of the 10 commandments? Shabbos. You think he's talking to the whole world? He ain't talking to the whole world. I heard people say, but what about Genesis chapter 2? Yeah, what about it? They say God created Shabbos for all mankind. That's not what it says. It says God created Shabbos. Very good. And he rested on the seventh day. Doesn't tell me what it means, right? Doesn't tell me anything. It just says he rested on the seventh day. And that's Shabbos. Very good. Comes Exodus chapter 20, right? Exodus chapter 20, God gives 10 commandments. Yeah, he gives 10 commandments. What are one of those commandments? Oh, one of those commandments are, or is, get my English better here, is you have to keep Shabbos. Well, very good. God is speaking to who? The Jewish people, right? He's speaking to the entire nation, 3 million people, 2 million people, 3 million people, whatever it is. He's speaking to the entire nation of Israel. I didn't know that he was speaking to non-Jews also and giving them an option. That's not what the Torah says. Torah makes very clear. It's a sign between me and you. So now, a non-Jew wants to participate. That's not going to convert. Okay. Maybe there's certain things they can do. But refraining from categories that are learned that you're not allowed to do, like writing and tearing and, and doing other things, right? Cooking, sewing, carrying, and whatever, any of these things. And they say, or use electricity, whatever category that comes under. That's an interesting discussion, right? We're not going to go there. But the point is, all these things don't apply to them. They don't apply to them. So I would say, this is the greatest chutzpah. They're going to say, I still want to participate in a much greater way where I'm really not allowed to. Well, why should you? Doesn't apply to you. Did God say I gave Shabbos to the entire world? He didn't say that, not my book, not even King James' book, not in any version, right? Not even Septuagint, translated into Greek. Anyone who wants to go learn Greek, yeah? Even that, any translation does not say God gave to everybody, right? So good. So someone's got a question, right? Legitimate question. What do you do with Genesis chapter 2? Again, did God give it to anybody? Did God say, this is for the non-Jews? And this is for everybody? It just says God rested. Okay. Where's the inference? That's for everybody. Oh, but Torah hasn't been given yet. Okay, granted. Torah hasn't been given yet. So maybe tell me all mankind participated in Shabbos. Ooh, maybe. Right? Maybe some individuals did at some level. We know the patriarchs kept the Torah before it was given, right? right? You got to understand what that means exactly. But who else? Who else is keeping Shabbos? Right? But there's no direct command. That's the point. You can look it up. Genesis chapter 2. There's no direct command for anyone to keep Shabbos. None. All it says God rests on the seventh day. Finish what he was creating. Yeah. So now someone's going to infer from that. It's a pretty bad inference. But someone's going to infer and say, no, I have a right to partake. Who says? Everything's codified at Mount Sinai. If everything's codified at Mount Sinai, that's it. It's only for the Jewish people. Oh, but then some people are going to say, but doesn't the Torah say it's one law for the Jew, right, and for the proselyte? Okay, that has to be understood also. That doesn't make sense logically. You have to look at it in the context, which people are very careful to take it out of context. Yeah, right? Very easily take it out of context, but it's got a specific context. If God spoke to the Jewish people in God's chosen nation, how is the law the same? Logically. Forget about oral law, right? Again, the Karaites gonna love me over here, right? They should all like this video, right? Any other Karaites that are out there. Yeah, come on. Who's gonna say such a thing? That's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. I have a part, I can say what I want, I can do what I want. It wasn't given to you. Totally wasn't given to you. It was codified on Mount Sinai, right? But how can it be? How can it be in general, right? I did make a video of this, whatever, a number of years ago, on the Torah portion of the week, that, even the Torah does say, I'm not saying it doesn't say it. The Torah says the law is the same. Yeah, the law is the same for a Jew and a proselyte. Very good. It can't be the entire Torah, because then we're not the chosen nation. Then everyone's chosen. That's the same law for everyone. This is a mistake. Because you have to look at it in context. What's it talking about? It's not talking about all mitzvahs. You got to look at the context. But again, according to simple logic, what would logic tell me? That cannot be true. How do I know? God chose the Jewish people. He spoke to Jewish people on Mount Sinai. He didn't speak to non-Jews. Even the converts he spoke to. Okay. But he didn't speak to any non-Jews. So if he didn't speak to any non-Jews, how's the law the same? The law cannot be the same by definition. Check. Mate. So where do they get such a thing? I don't know. Right? But it's deceiving. Right? It's deceiving. It's only deceiving if you don't know what it means. Right? Torah says it in a few places that the law is the same. Okay. Doesn't mean the entire law. That can't mean that. That means Jews are not unique. Right? When the Torah says, I was just learning something today, where it says in it says in the book of Leviticus that God took us out of Egypt and he differentiated us from the non-Jews. How do you do that? Because we don't eat shrimp, right? We don't eat non-kosher food. That's all the laws and Parsh Shmini all about what we're allowed to eat, not allowed to eat. Non-Jews have that command? They don't have that command. God says, I took you out of Egypt for that purpose, to sanctify you. He didn't say I'm sanctifying the non-Jews, right? So where does anyone get off saying, oh, the whole law is the same? What do you mean the law is the same? Where do you see the law is the same? It's either you're a Jew or you're a non-Jew. Oh, now you're going to ask. Very good. So what does this verse mean? Okay, good question. But it can't mean what you think it means. It's obvious it can't mean what you think it means, right? How do I know? Because Jews and non-Jews are different. The law cannot be the same. God spoke to the Jewish people about Mount Sinai, period. He didn't speak to anybody else. So how can the entire law be the same? Maybe within certain law, maybe there's no difference. Maybe it applies equally to Jews and non-Jews. That could be. It depends what the law is. But for goodness sakes, you can't use Webster's 8th definition, which people do. They do quite often. Like, I get this guy keep trolling me, which gonna have some fun of my Q&As, this week. It's like, I've asked all these rabbis, and no one can answer Isaiah 53. Oh, really? Nobody? Yeah, cut and paste from Toby and Singer. Yeah, let's see what you do with that. Nobody can answer this. Nobody can, I'll throw out one question. Very funny question. I'm gonna deal with it this week also. You say you got all these balls, other people all converting to Christianity. No one's converting to Judaism. Like, why do you think that is? So what's their conclusion? What's their obvious conclusion? Right? I don't want to save all my punchlines for my Q&A, right? But that might be on Thursday. I got other things to cover. But what's my punchline? Don't you think it's a lot easier to convert to Christianity than be a Jew? If I were to tell everybody, listen, you can do whatever you want your entire life, eat what you want, do what you want, you say a few Hail Marys, you believe in JC, and that's it. I don't have to take responsibility for my life, for anything. Pay off a few bishops, this and that, everything's good. Everybody loves me. What's the problem? Even God loves me. All three of them, right? Me, myself, and I, my Sybil complex, all three of us. Beautiful. The God loves us all. Yeah. Would that be a much easier sale? Right? If I was going to rewrite Judaism, I'd make like 5 laws, 10 laws maximum, and make them very easy. Extremely easy. Easy schmeezy, Kaufman would say. You make it so easy, everyone's going to want to do it and follow it. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to make all these convoluted laws that don't make any sense. Purity, impurity, you got the unfaithful wife, you have kashrus laws, Shabbos laws, you got to send away the mother bird, and take the egg. A lot of things that don't make logical sense. Probably 80% or more of the Torah doesn't make logical sense. Okay, we have to understand it, right? We have to learn it to the best of our ability. Very good. Right? So the question was, I didn't even read through the whole thing, but I think this was the gist of the question, is that look how many people convert to Christianity and how many people, convert to Judaism. That doesn't mean Christianity's right. There's no proof that it's right. All you have to do, is sprinkle a little water on yourself and you're good. Right? I mean, for us, it just means you get a little bit wet, but okay. What do you have to believe in? The only thing you have to believe in is JC's your savior. That's it. What else do you have to believe in? Oh, you have to believe in, if you don't believe in the Gospels and this and that, are you out? I don't think so. The main thing is JC's the Messiah. Very good. Yeah, pass the buck. I can do what I want. A few Hail Marys, I'm good. No responsibility for my actions. Don't you think that's an easier thing to sign up for? Than to sign up for like 613 commandments where there are billions and billions of laws of what to learn and how to do things and do it the right way? Of course. Why do you think so many people haven't converted to Judaism? Because we make it darn stinking hard. we only want the cream of the crop. Aren't you guys glad you're here listening to this rant? Yeah? That's what we want. We want people who are not going to wilt. People, as Kaufman would say, are going to be the real deal. Right? They're not going to be wusses, as we'd say in Boston. You got to have thick shoulders. That's what you got to have to finish this process, or even start the process. Right? Either way, with all the anti-Semitism, I think you're out of your minds. Right? With everything going on, you got a target on your back. Okay. So people say I wear, a Jewish symbol and this and that. Dress like an Orthodox Jew. Walk down the street, see what happens. Yeah, everyone's going to be a target. Okay, but we're not changing the way we dress. But that's not even the point, right? What is my point? Right? That's not even the point. So the person says, look at all people convert to Christianity. I'm not even talking about people who are illiterate. And they went into they went into Peru and these, I don't know, in the Andes somewhere, and they found all these peasants and whatever they converted. Very good. Yeah? So you go, oh, but look at all those other people that they converted. Okay. So that means that we're right. Because we converted all these people. First of all, we're not a religion looking to convert people. You want to convert? Okay, we're going to grill you. We're going to make it hard. We want the cream of the crop. That's not even the point. Just because you converted all these people, it means, oh, this is the right thing. That means you're right. You make it very easy, right? Trying to get people to convert to Islam. How many people are going to end up converting to Islam? It's not so hard either, right? I think Christianity is a lot easier, right? But even so, the easier the religion is, yeah, the easier it is to gonna convert to it if you're gonna believe it. But something that a lot of things don't make sense. You know, imagine, imagine my famous example. You walk into an Orthodox synagogue on Sukkot, right? The first day of the festival, or the middle days of the festival. You walk in exactly when they're shaking the lulav, right? They're saying the Thanksgiving psalm, saying hello. They're saying, they're shaking the lulav like this. They're shaking it like that. I got my lemon on steroids, right? I got my esrog. I got my lulav. I got my willow leaves. I got my myrtle leaves, and they're shaking with all their might like this, like this. Half the people probably don't even know what they're doing, right? How about they even know what they're saying? Okay, right? At whatever level. They're going to think, what planet did I drop off from? Where did I come from? Yeah. So you're going to, of course. A lot of things don't make any sense. A lot of things you have to really study. You have to learn it in depth. You have to learn all the holidays. Things are, you got to learn Hebrew, right? That's going to be fun, right? You got to learn Hebrew. Many things you have to learn. And it's going to take years before you perfect things. Okay. But it's not going to take years to convert. It shouldn't take that long, right? Take, a couple of years, hopefully, if you live in a Jewish community. But again, that's not even the point. If you want to make it easy and believe in nothing, basically, sure. Like, what would you rather do? Let's give someone a choice. What would you rather do? Eat, cake, ice cream, and cookies, or seaweed and bread, right? Then you're going to ask when bad things happen to good people. Like, what would you rather eat? Things that are totally unhealthy but taste good? Or healthy things that taste like seaweed? Why do I say seaweed? Well, I remember in fifth grade, someone brought in seaweed as, I don't know, part of some sort of project, and we had all the merit. Like a 10-year-old sit there and like chomp on the seaweed. I'm talking about before seaweed became seaweed today, or changed, or whatever. Right? Tastes like seaweed. Right? That's what it tastes like. Yeah. Of course. You gotta pick something. Tastes better, right? Even if it's not healthy for you, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna pick something easy. So now you want to, I'm just on that thought. So now you want to tell me, okay, so that means Christianity is superior. Well, will it prove anything? You're going to say, we got numbers, sheer numbers. Okay, how many of you Christians really know what they're talking about? Yeah, I had these Mormons. Mormons. I was in South America, in Santiago, in Chile. And the biggest group of Mormons outside of what do you call Salt Lake City. Yeah, where are they? In Chile. I don't know exactly how they got there. It doesn't matter. These were like the brightest guys, I ever met. And they started asking me questions. I gave them answers, and then like they didn't have answers for me. So what does a good missionary do? They go to the next question. By the third question, I said, listen, I'm a little bit thick in the head. I want some answers. So finally they come back and say, don't you believe, John Smith, 200 years, in a what do you call it, in a cave, and he found the Book of Mormon. I said, did you ever read Exodus chapter 19, 20? So what do you mean? They said God gave the only case ever in the history of any so-called religion that God spoke to an entire nation. 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, not including women and children. Yeah. I said, and that's documented. Passed down generation. I said, that kind of beats your story of 200 years in a book in a cave, now doesn't it? And they will say, well, you look at the Cadus Yitzchok, right? You look at the binding of Isaac. They said, oh, it's a hint to JC. Where do you see that? He didn't die. It's like, no, but it's a hint. I said, did you read the end? According to everybody, any version, he doesn't die. I mean, I didn't go into Kabbalah what happens. Whatever, he doesn't die. Yeah, so like as I said, these guys weren't the brightest guys, I ever met. But I said, let me give you a blessing. Let me give you a blessing. I said, there are thousands, tens of thousands of Christians don't know nothing. Don't waste your time on me. I'm too far gone. Yeah, go out and educate them. Yeah, because they don't know nothing. They don't know nothing. And I said, by the way, go back to whoever teaches you and get me some answers. And that was the end of that. And that was even before I got involved in, conversion, whatever. So numbers don't mean anything because a lot of people don't know anything. So they're just there brainwashed by everybody else. right? So if the brainwashed by anybody else, all you have to do, and everyone who's listening to this, is come out of Christianity or wherever they came from. Most people out of Christianity, they know it doesn't make any sense. And it shouldn't make any sense because it doesn't. If you're thinking, but how do they keep you in line? How do they keep you in line out of fear? Because if you don't believe in JC, you fry now forever, right? It's mind-boggling, right? So whatever. I'll have to save that for this week. But again, keep in mind there are symbols for the sake of the Jewish people, and that's it, right? And other things non-Jews should stay away from. Now, if they're in the process of conversion, good. So then they're allowed to do things. Can't do tefillin, right? So after conversion, you have to know before, how to put them on. Okay, right? For men, very good, right? Shabbos, you got to do something to break it on purpose, right? Say, oh, I'll break it, a number of times if you don't know what you're doing. That doesn't matter. Breaking it has to be something on purpose, right? Again, so the person says, but God would never want me to break Shabbos. And I can't believe God. I said, okay, forget about listening to rabbis and everything else. If you do it and you imitate being a Jew where you have no right to, and it doesn't belong to you, that's death penalty, right? Not for everything, right? Certainly keeping Shabbos. Yeah, I said, that's the bottom line. I kept coming back with other things. I go, that's the bottom line. If you're going to be a Jew, Coppin's law is you do it right. If you're not going to do it right, do what you want, right? But who gives you the Shabbos is a very good example. Shabbos is a very good example. And the fact is, God says it's a sign between me and you, i.e. the Jewish people. Who else is he talking to? Super Noahites? He ain't talking Super Noahites. That I can guarantee you. He's talking to 3 million people. That's who he's talking to. Yeah, so what gives them the right? Now, does that mean they can't participate in anything? No. Doesn't mean they can't participate. There are things. I gave class on Noahide laws. There are things they can do. Yeah. But if they start doing things like Jews, see, if they start doing things like Jews, meaning they are refraining from certain categories of work, that's forbidden. That 100% is forbidden. Other things they can do. Yeah, certain things they can do. But I think it's the ultimate chutzpah. They say we don't want to join. That's fine, right? We're not interested in converting people unless someone wants to convert. Very good. But at the same time, even if that's the case, either stay a non-Jew or convert, right? I think it's very simple. But the chutzpah is, I have a right. You have no right. Non-Jews, no offense, any non-Jews listening here. Non-Jews have no right to participate in things that don't apply to them. Period. Unless you're going to convert. You want to convert, great. You don't want to convert, that's also fine. I keep you busy till the next 250 years if I live that long. Very good. But you're going to participate in something that doesn't belong to you because you want to feel more spiritual. Well, it's too bad. So join. I can't move, or my spouse doesn't want to convert. Okay. But that doesn't give you a right to do what you want. You're not, a pseudo-looking Jew wannabe, sort of, right? Either go one way or the other, right? That's it. But I think, I think the fact that, some people would say, oh, I don't have to convert. You're right. 100%. Nobody has to convert, right? But if you're going to stay a non-Jew, you stay a non-Jew. You do what you're allowed to do, right? If I tell people, listen, all these things you're not allowed to do, everyone's going to say, why? I want to do it. Right? All the things I want to do, you say you can't do, so I want to do it. Okay. But again, either you go one way or the other. Yeah, and it confuses a lot of people. And a lot of people don't care either. Because some people say we can't keep Shabbos. Wink, wink, wink. No, it's not wink, wink, wink. You're a non-Jew. You didn't convert. You can't keep Shabbos like a Jew. You want to participate? Certain things you can do. Okay. Yeah, within reason. Yeah. But it's a sign between God, right, and Jewish people. All right, let me Let me take some questions here if there are any questions. Someone says, whoever loves Hashem will pursue the laws of Hashem. Whoever loves Hashem is going to do what Hashem wants them to do in the right way. In other words, a person needs to pray, and that the fact that the Gemara says the person wants to go in the right direction, God will help them. If they want to go in the wrong direction, God will not stop them. Right? Now, if you want to do it and you want to do it the right way, which we have no problem. Anyone who wants to do it the right way, either is a non-Jew or is a JIT, what I'll call a Jew in training, it's beautiful. Yeah, you're going to do it the right way. That'll cause God to love you and you love him. Very good. A person can love God and be totally, totally skew things also. And I'm not saying they're doing it as an act of rebellion. There are plenty of people, I think, in the Reform and Conservative movement, I think some of them, I'm not going to say all of them, I think some of them mean well. I think some of them really want to have a connection to God. But they'll say, listen, I'm not Reform. I'm certainly not going to be Orthodox. I'll be conservative, but they don't know what conservative means. They say, oh, we're just less religious. They don't really know how it started, what the beliefs are, and that's not really the point. But their heart might be in the right place. Might be. Yeah? So if the heart's in the right place for the right reason, God will help them. God will put them in the right direction. If anyone grew up, unfortunately, like me and other people I know that I grew up with, went to Hebrew school. Yeah, that's about where the education ended. Right? The joke is the bad joke. There are 4 times in a person's life they'll use their Hebrew name. When they're born, bar bat mitzvah, when they get married, and when they die. For most people, when they get, bar bat mitzvah at 12 or 13, then if you're a boy or a girl, that's where your Jewish education ends. Right? If you're lucky, maybe you marry someone Jewish, but it's going to be very, very watered down. Very, very watered down. Yeah, and you won't be able to pass it down. Okay. Now, even based on that, you got a major thing going on, and that is lack of education. Right? And that's, it's not about, oh, I believe this, I believe that, or I could never believe this. Did you ever look into it? Did you ever think about it? No, I just don't think, it doesn't fit my world outlook. That wasn't the question. Is it true or it's not true? Most people don't care. They're just going to do what they want. Okay. Right? Even based on that. So I know a handful of people, grew up conservative, suffered through, Hebrew school, whatever, ended up becoming Orthodox Jews. Right? Later in life. Right? Either through college or later, whatever it is. There are some people who actually got out. Right? Even if they studied, like I did, upper echelons of the, of the conservative community, right? In their headquarters in New York, the Jewish Theological Seminary. Okay. Even if you got there, other people got out of it, became Orthodox. They saw the fallacy. Of it. Now, most everybody else, if they're not going in the right direction, they won't get there unless something major happens. It could be sometimes what can happen is, let's say a parent dies. Parent dies, so they feel an obligation, probably not my generation, maybe a few people in my generation, let's say. They probably would, right? I would think at least for a certain amount of time. They'll go to synagogue to say Kaddish. They'll go to synagogue to say the mourner's prayer. Now, usually they'll come, they'll say whatever, they'll leave. Other people, because they come more often, they get, quote unquote, more into religion. So that can drive them to become more religious. Now, how often does it happen? Good question. Good question. But there are people guaranteed that will become more interested and more religious because of it. Is it a high percentage? Probably not. Right? Probably not a high percentage, but it could happen. And what about everybody else? Where does everybody else, fall in this category? And there are a lot of places, because all these synagogues are dying. All these places, all these synagogues, are bellying up. All these conservative synagogues. Yeah. So a friend of my father's once said, I told my father they used to I used to go to another synagogue like during the high holy days because it had so many people, so a bigger crowd or whatever. So I said, tell everyone, bang your gavel on the beam or whatever, and say, my son in Israel says, repeat after me, Iskadav Iskadash, right? The mourner's prayer, like it's all over. So this friend of mine's father, who, I knew growing up, said, you tell your son in Israel, we're never gonna die. You tell him we're never gonna die. Okay, so now you're gonna know Kaufman's a prophet. I said, of course you're gonna die. It's only a matter of time. Now, where's Kaufman's prophecy come from? Where does the wisdom come from? If you look at the minyan, the people who pray there, the average age is 75. Now, if the average age is 75, they're not staying around too long. Right? Maybe they'll be coming in walkers and wheelchairs, I don't know what, but they're gonna die. They're gonna die at some point because the average age is old. And they don't have any young people anymore. What happens when you don't have young people? It dies. It's very simple, right? So this person says, you tell your son, right? I got the report back. My father gave me the report back, bless his memory. He said, you tell your son, we're never gonna die. How long did it take? 2 years. 2 years. 2 years later, they folded. Now, it's bad to be a prophet in that sense, but it's obvious. You can't pass it down, disappear. So the ones that want the truth, that are really seeking, and that's what I think you mean over here, if they're really seeking, God will help them. God will show them the fallacy, and God will get them the help they need. Might be hard, it might take time, whatever it is, but they'll get there. Somehow they'll get there. There's so much information on the web today, right? Unbelievable amount of information, a lot of bad information, but there's also good information, right? People can get it if they want it. Right? Certainly if they want it. So whoever loves Hashem will pursue the laws of Hashem if they do it for the right reason and for the right purpose. If they're doing it for that, God will ultimately help them. Yes. Right? 100%. 100% God will help them. And that makes sense because they're going in the right path. They're going in the right path for the right reason. Now, if they're going to the right path for the wrong reason, for whatever other reason, are they going to get there? Probably not. Right? Maybe they'll get there. Don't know. Right? My guess is not that way. Right? That's my guess. And it makes sense. Right? So now, back to your question. Whoever loves Hashem will pursue the laws of Hashem if they're truthful. Right? We say in Psalm 150 in Ashrei, God listens to those who call him out in truth. Doesn't mean in lies. Doesn't mean Webster's 8th definition. It means in truth. Literally. If he sees someone calling out in truth, he will send someone to help them. If they're calling out and they're just faking, okay, whatever happens. Right? Good luck. Yeah? Bad to say that, but that's the truth. And the reason is you got to want it. You got to be sincere. Right? If you're not sincere, you won't get to the truth. You just won't. Maybe it means the law is the same for everyone who pursues them. No, it's not what it means. When it says the law is the same, it's specific cases. There's talking, I think, about Paschal offering, right? For one thing. And in another case, talking about something else. Yeah? It's talking about, if you look in the context over there, what it's talking about, it's pretty clear. It's not a random thing that the Torah all of a sudden just says, well, the law is one and the same. It can't be. By logic, it can't be. Not just though you're going to pursue God in the same way. You see, that's not the case. Yeah, how do I know? Because there are 80,000 different religions. People going in a million different directions. Right? I'm not just saying, some people learn Musar, some people learn Halacha. No. Right? They're going in totally different directions, totally different religions. So the law, the Torah itself, the Old Testament, whatever you want to call it, right? The law itself can never be the same. By logic, it can never be the same. Right? The entire law. Maybe some things are similar. Could be. Maybe some things apply the same. Right? That's the whole problem also. But let's say maybe some things would apply equally. They probably won't. Right? But if the Torah over here says they are one and the same, what does that mean? it means in one aspect. It cannot mean in the entire Torah, right? And we're not going to say, no offense, we're not going to say esoterically it means they're pursuing God the same way. That's not what it means. That's not the context. It's absolutely not the context, right? People can love God. They can say, we both love God. Okay. But the law for a Jew and a non-Jew is very different. Extremely different. Yeah. Extremely different. So that wouldn't necessarily make sense, even in an esoteric way, right? Because it's radically different what Jews and non-Jews are allowed to do and what they're supposed to do. I'll give an example. I'll give one example. The Torah says, Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. The Torah says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, first 10 commandments. How do you know I'm the Lord your God? He took us out of Egypt, the house of bondage. Very good. What is the Torah telling me? The Torah is telling me very explicitly, God intervenes in history. That's what he's telling me, right? That's what God says. I intervene in history. Commentators ask, why did he say he created the world? Because nobody was there when he created the world. It was God himself, right? Genesis chapter 1. Gracious bar Elohim Esa Shemayim Ve'esa Aretz. God created the heaven and the earth. And before that, there was God. And after that, there's God. Was there anybody there before that? No. God was there himself. Very good. So what does Exodus chapter 2 tell me? It tells me God intervenes in history. Now that is a major, major tenet in Judaism. God intervenes in history. How do I know from the Exodus from Egypt? Right? Because there's a rabbi making, $1 million a year. 20 years ago gets up and he says, yeah, 7-day Passover, it never happened. Exodus never happened. I was like, why don't we eat matzah? It's a myth. Well, I think you're a myth. I'm not going to eat 35 pounds of matzah or, 10 kilo of matzah, in 25 seconds and whistle Dixie at my house. Forget it. I'm not going to do it if it didn't exist. What do? You rip out, 20% of the book, of the Bible. You rip it out because it didn't happen. But now you got to know. You said it doesn't exist. Right? Didn't happen because the rabbi tells you this. Right? Didn't happen. Right? So I would say, so why do you eat matzah? Why do you pray the evening service? No, you don't have to. Well, the evening service is all about coming out of Egypt. You say Kiddush Friday night, about coming out of Egypt. Right? Commemorating creation also. Many things commemorate in Egypt. Well, why do we say it if it didn't happen? Oh, smart aleck kid, get out of here, right? I want to hear your question, right? But again, here you have something. That's my point. I don't get lost in my parable, right? What's the point? The point is, who has to believe in divine providence? Jews. The non-Jews have an obligation as one of the Noahide laws, or any derivative of the Noahide laws, about 50 or 60, let's say, altogether. Do they have any obligation whatsoever to believe that God intervenes in history? And the answer is no. They have no obligation. I asked my rabbi this question. I was shocked. I said, really? He said, no. Why do they have to believe in divine providence? They have to believe God exists. And there's one God, right? They can't believe in idolatry. They have to believe God runs the world, in charge. I said, well, I think that's a good thing. Not obligated. Right? I think it's a good thing. I would cop and would say it's a moral imperative, not an obligation. Right? That's a major difference. Jews and non-Jews at that point, if you say that, even if it's not a moral obligation, a moral imperative, right? As I would say, then we are looking at two different worlds. We're looking at the same world in the sense that God exists and God is one. And God doesn't change. And God isn't fickle. And God doesn't change his mind. God's absolute, as the Rambam says, in the first of the 13 principles of faith. Very good. Right? That's very good. But God intervenes in history. Why does a non-Jew have to believe that? To make them a good non-Jew. To make them a good Noahide. They don't have to. I think it's a good thing. I think you look at the world very differently, but you don't have to. Right? It was an eye-opener for me as well. Right? That's a major difference. I mean, there are other differences, but that's a major difference of the way you look at the world. All right? Somebody asked, man, he verse treating the stranger the same when it comes to how you treat one another. That's something else. That is something else. What does Hillel say? A convert comes to him, right? We found converts here. Convert comes to him, right, and says, teach me the Torah on 1 foot. Yeah. So Shammai throws him out. right? It's smart aleck. Right? You want to learn Torah 1 foot, scram, right? Right? You don't even want to deal with it. Okay. Hillel says, don't do to others what you wouldn't want to be done to yourself. The rest of the Torah is go learn the rest of the Torah, right? That's the main principle. Don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. Yeah. So you're right. We need to treat people the same. We shouldn't make any difference if they're a Jew or a non-Jew. Yeah. But again, Kohen has different status. Levi has a different status. State doesn't really matter so much in general, right? But they have a different status. Rabbi has a different status, right? And in certain ways. But even without that, I don't even have to come on to that. Because even if we treat each other the same, the way we're supposed to, right? Let's say what we call derech eretz, proper, the way a person should treat another. Yeah, okay, that could be, that could be the same in some ways, but it's not, because not everyone's created equal. Oh, YouTube's gonna ban me. It's a good thing I'm recording this other ways. Yeah, not everybody's created equal. Now, I didn't say better, right? Jewish people were chosen. And what does that chosenness mean? Right? People say, oh, you think you're better than us. That's nothing to do with being better. Non-Jew wants to take on all the mitzvahs, they can take on all the mitzvahs. They're more than happy to take on all my mitzvahs. Yeah? There's more obligation. When a person says, Shor Tzani Goy in the morning, thank God you made me not a non-Jew. Thank God you make me a slave. Thank God you make me a woman. What do we hate? Yeah, okay, maybe we hate slaves. Maybe we hate women. I don't know. Depends, right? Maybe we hate non-Jews. What's the context? What's the context? Context is about mitzvahs. Mitzvahs. Yeah. Slaves and women only do mitzvahs that are not bound by time. Obviously, women have to keep Shabbos. They have to keep festivals, right? Obviously, they have to keep kashrus and other things. Prayer. They want to pray, they can. If they don't, they should pray at least once a day, not twice a day, right? Depending on the circumstances. But, like sitting in a sukkah, difference of opinion, Ashkenazim and Sephardim. According to Sephardic tradition, women don't have to sit in the sukkah. Not only don't have to sit in the sukkah, but if they do, they don't make a blessing. According to Ashkenazic tradition, women do make a blessing. It's a mitzvah bound by time. Sukkah is a mitzvah bound by time because every fall we have the holiday of sukkahs. You got to sit in the sukkah. Men, women, you can tell me it's a mitzvah bound by time. Women are obligated. Shabbos comes up every week. Women are obligated. All the holidays, women are obligated. Yeah, pretty much the same. Right? A few things here and there a little bit different, but in general, pretty much the same. Yeah. So it's not so you're gonna say, well, aren't men and women different? Right? So I'm speaking about the whole feminist, right? And talking about women and Judaism, which we're not gonna get into, but still a good line. He says, there ain't any difference between men and women. Right? Today would be really funny. Yeah, because you have transgender and who knows what else is out there. Right? He says, there ain't any difference between men and women. And these big time feminists go, no, there's no difference. Yeah, no difference. Okay, let me ask the question again. Any differences? Any differences you can think of. I can think of one. Women can give birth. Men can't do that. Right? Still not proven. Men can't give birth. Right? That's a difference. Right? Come up with other different physiologically, they're different. Okay. So maybe if they're different, in physiological, maybe they're different spiritually. Maybe. Right? You can't say they're the same. It's not a question of who's better over here. The question who's got greater obligations. They say, I want to go pray with a minion, right? A woman says, okay. So you have kids, so what are you going to do? Now, if you tell me you got an obligation, you got little kids, and you have an obligation to pray with a minion, a woman, let's say, you're going to say, it's not fair. What am I supposed to do? I got kids. Find a babysitter. Work it out. Women have a different role, right? They have a different role. Now, what happens when they don't have kids? When they don't have obligations? Can they go to synagogue? Absolutely. Can they go in the morning just like men? Sure. Right? No different. I'm just listening to something now about women's education, Orthodox synagogue. whatever, someone was speaking about the lack thereof. Women, women, come out of seminary, let's say, they're all fired up, they get married and they start working and they have kids and whatever, very intellectual, and a lot of places don't have so many classes for women. So the whole question exactly why, what to do about it. But I was in the middle of listening to something, earlier. There's a need, right? I definitely think certainly for some people there's a need. But what happens? Someone was saying, what happens when they're, 40, 50, they don't have kids. They don't have kids to worry about. And they ask most people like of that age, like, do you pray during the day? So the person gone to like many different communities, around the states. And he said the answer of, many, many times was no. Now I can understand if you got little kids, you know, if you have little kids, very hard to pray and this and that, and you're busy, okay. Yeah, try and at least pray once a day, but even for that's going to be hard. Okay. What about later? Women also have to have their own connection to God, right? So you can tell me there's an excuse, raising kids, you can't get out, this, that. It's very hard to have your own connection sometimes. Yeah, that I hear. And what happens when you're older? What happens when you're older? Why should that be? Why is all of a sudden like the Judaism? Not that Judaism goes out the window. Yeah, they just don't learn and they don't pray. Yeah, they're not going to remember what they learned 30 years before, most likely. And obviously, keeping Shabbos, you know, they have to know how to keep it. And certainly, they'll probably know the laws better than the men, right? In general. But the older you get, you forget if you don't review and this and that. They also have to be stimulated. There's no question. Women need to get out. Also, just be inspired. No question. So, when a person's older and it's easier, why don't, that was the question. Why don't so many places have classes for women? Good question. And who should they be taught by? That's another question. Should they be taught by women? What about a rebbitzin? And they like whatever, the whole slew of things. So it's interesting, interesting discussion. So how people should be treated, yeah, we're not all equal, right? I got some news for people that, also get me banned, which, see what YouTube does over here, right? And that is, if you read the Ramchal Derech Hashem, by the way, which I gave a course on, 60 classes, or 30 classes, 60 hours, the Ramchal says a non-Jew is at a major disadvantage. Not intellectual, and nothing to do with being intellectual. They're at a major disadvantage. What's the disadvantage? The disadvantage is they don't have the complete soul that a Jew has. And the only way a Jew has that complete soul is because they heard the Torah Mount Sinai. That's the difference. So you have more obligations, more ways of working on yourself, other things, many more mitzvahs to do. Yeah? So non-Jews will have a portion of the world to come. No question. Right? They keep the no-hide laws, they do what they're supposed to do. It's not going to look the same as the Jews because they have less mitzvahs. Right? They have a lot less mitzvahs. Now, if they want to convert, whatever, okay. Right? But, it's a lot easier to lose mitzvahs being a Jew than as a non-Jew. Yeah, certainly not every transgression a non-Jew does is going to be liable for death penalty. Some things yes, some things no. But a non-Jew can have a portion of the world to come. Very good. But keep in mind, the only difference, whether a Jew is religious or not religious, is that their soul is at Mount Sinai. I'm not talking about converts here, right? That their soul is at Mount Sinai. A non-Jew can't say that unless they convert. Yeah? So they're at a disadvantage. They're at a disadvantage because they don't have that same spark. They don't have that same spark. But anyone who wants to convert, we can say their soul is probably Mount Sinai. That's the only reason they want to convert. They're coming back to the roots. How their soul became non-Jewish and turns to Jewish again. That's a whole discussion according to Kabbalah. We're not going there either, right? A lot of things, a lot of interesting discussion, not going there. But keep in mind that, as the Ramchal says, their soul is not the same soul makeup. Now, if it's not the same soul makeup, they're at a disadvantage. That's just the way it is. no matter how hard a non-Jew tries, they're not going to get to that level unless they convert, right? No matter what they do. That being said, so you're going to say, well, it's not fair. And as we always say, life has nothing to do with fair or not fair, right? The question comes up a lot. People will say, it's not fair. I was born as a non-Jew. Why did I have to be born as a non-Jew? Someone else will say, why did I have to be born into a messed up family? Someone will say, why did I have to be, go through a destructive marriage? Someone will say, why did I have to give birth to a stillborn? Someone will say, why did I get leukemia? Someone will say, a million things. They're all valid, right? Why did this happen, that happened? Yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows. We're not given any choices over here. Whose families were put in, we're born against the will, die against the will, couple with same parentheses, still have to live, right? We don't have a choice. Who our siblings are, or our parents are, socioeconomic situation, a lot of things. A lot of things we're not in control. That's not even the point, right? That's not even the point. What people will say, but I had to go through this, I had to go through that, and I had to go through something I just read earlier. Ramaylich Biederman, he puts Eli Melech Biederman puts out a part sheet every week. He's got whatever, a lot of he's Hasidic, so he tells a lot of unbelievable stories. And stories that he heard, stories from previous generations. And he was saying something, each tribe, right, had its own flag, right? So also did a video on that, on the flags, what to do with the flags or whatever, right? But he was talking about the flags, and each tribe had their unique flag, right? So he's saying that each person has their unique thing that they're doing in this world. Now, get to the punchline. Get to the punchline. He says, for some people, you know what they're doing in this world? You're going to love this, right? You're going to have to listen to this like 1,000 times because it's going to overwhelm you. Some people are in this world, they're in this world to be poor. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. But why are they in this world? In order to perfect the fact that they're going to be happy with the little that they have. We can end now. Like, I read this and I was like, being on both sides of the coin, right? You'll say, well, isn't poverty harder? It's harder in different ways, right? In different ways. But what's the test of, we always say, what's the test of a rich person? The test of a rich person, is he going to be haughty? Is he going to be conceited? Is he going to thank God for all the bounty that he has? Yeah. Or is he going to lift his nose up and be snobby and think, I did everything. I created myself. I did this. Yeah. And what's the test of a poor person? The test of a poor person is that even at the little that they have, are they going to be dancing in front of God and singing his praises? Now it gets better. It gets better. I was like, wow, this is he speaks a lot about this, about people going through suffering, and going through hard times. And he says, we all go through them. We all go through them. Some have it more, some have it less. No one's ever down, forever, whatever. But he made the point, and he makes this point over and over and over. And he says it's absolutely normal. It's absolutely normal to say, like, what's going on? I'm trying this, and I'm trying that, and I'm trying the other thing. And it means God doesn't love me, right? Now, I've heard this many, many times. It means God hates me. So I'll tell you, if God hated you, he'd give you $1 million and make you hit the lottery. Because then God says, I don't need you, right? I don't need your prayers. I don't need anything. I'll give you everything and whatever. The fact that a person gets tossed around and a person has difficulty, as hard as it is, he says it's normal, 100%. He's not the only one who said this. I've heard many other people say this. It's very normal to feel like a piece of dirt, like you have nowhere to go. And he said, though, to say that God doesn't love me, God loves everybody. So then why does he do this? Right? Why did he put me through this? Why did he put me through that? So what is a test in general? A test, Kaufman would say, is trying to get some dormant character trait out of you that he couldn't get out otherwise. And the only way to do it is to squeeze you like the bottom of the toothpaste, right? Anyone who patents that, I'm going to sue you. That's my line. Yeah, he's going to squeeze you like the bottom of the toothpaste. Now you're going to say, that shows he cares. Now remember, we have, we said before, what's the easiest religion to convert to? I think it's Christianity, one of them. Yeah, because you don't have to do anything. There are no obligations, right? Very few obligations. All I have to do is believe in JC and you're good. Okay. Now, even with that, isn't that an easier way to live? Easier way to live. Much easier way to live. I don't take responsibility for anything, not what I think, not what I do, right? Now, that being the case, says Rabbi Biderman, you think God doesn't care? You think everybody has their trial, whatever it is. And he was saying, because I'm sure a lot of people have come to him with this complaint, and that is, I tried this, I tried that. I'm still pushing 2 dimes together. I'm still having all this, all this difficulty. And he says, don't you see? Don't you see how special you are? Don't you see how special the test is? Test isn't there to break you. That's not what the test is for. The test has come to make you shine. You're going to say, come on, make me shine, right? Yeah, you're going to take a sledgehammer approach? And you're going to say, wow, the best way to make you shine, right? Hit you over there with the sledgehammer? Think about what a person has in this world. What do or better, let's say better. What does a person take from this world? The only thing you take are your mice and toys, or your good deeds, or God forbid your bad deeds. That's all you take, right? Maybe like the Chinese or Japanese, when they, when a person dies, they put toy cars in there, toy credit cards, so they can use them in the next world. Well, they're in for a big surprise, right? But that's all we take. And when God judges us, what's he judging us for? Not for money, not for anything, because we have nothing. You're a pure soul. Now the question is, what did you do? And how did you use it? So there are plenty of people out there that are in despair. Absolute despair. Yeah? Why are they in despair? Because they have a hard life. And everything is hard. Right? Every last thing seems to be hard. So I would say not everything, but probably a lot of things. Okay. Right? But he's saying, look at the opportunity. Look at the misgavers, the strength a person has to have. Even when they feel they're being sledgehammered, yeah, they can still say, I'm still thankful for the be here. I'm still thankful for the ability to serve you. Now, some people will say, why should I? Why? Why should I serve him? Look what he does to me. Look how hard it is. Look how hard the conversion process. They make me wait a year. They make me wait 6 months. They make me, jump through hoops and this and that. Everything about life isn't fair. Okay? Yeah? So why do you have to go through it? Because God thinks you have to go through it. And that's what's going to make the person. Now, based on that, does that mean every single person is being thrown to the wolves, is now doing the jitterbug, doing the moonwalk? I don't even know how to do either, right? And you're whistling Dixie every single day? No, that's not what it means, right? Doesn't mean, I'm going to turn the other cheek. Oh, can I have another one? Slap. No. What it means is, even in the hardship, you can see godliness. You're going to say, how can I do that? How can I see godliness? Yeah? Take a walk in a park on a nice day. It doesn't have to be rainy. Even in the rain's even good. Yeah? See, look what rain does. Brings things back to life. Yeah? Now in spring, things coming back to life. Life is, the weather is warmer, most parts of the world. Right? Very good. So you go outside, you sniff the air, things are okay. I don't care if there's smog, whatever. Yeah? You're looking at God's universe. Now, when you look at God's universe, all you have to do, you don't have to do that. Yeah? Both of us says, all you have to do, you look at nature. Okay. But even looking at nature, I can go one step easier. All you have to do is look at the human body. Yeah, one little thing, the human body goes off, whole body. The whole body. You got one little virus. Yeah. I had the other night. Gone. Gone. For a day, an entire day. Yeah, thank God, back to normal. But when something in the body doesn't go right, right? Usually the whole body is out of whack. Person, let's say, broke a finger, stubbed a toe, not even something like so egregious. When something hurts, it's not usually, oh, it's just my hand hurts. It affects the whole body. Now, someone's going to say, we don't look at the world like that. We don't look at the human body. We don't look at these other things. We're just wallowing in our own self-pity. But you're going to say, of course, because it's hard. You're right. 100%. But that's as if to say, I have absolutely zero to be thankful for. Well, would you rather live in the street? Go to India. Go look at pictures of kids living in India starving. You gotta say, come on, don't be so graphic. Oh, really? I can think of other graphic things to say, right? Not gonna go there. A lot worse, 10 times worse situation, but nobody cares. You know why nobody cares? Because they're going through their own personal hell. They're going through their own personal difficulty, whatever it is. And it can be multiple things, right? God saves that for the best, right? He doesn't just give you one trial, he gives you 50 in one shot. It'll be in health, it'll be with your kids, it'll be with your parents, it'll be with who knows what, right? You have all these tests all in one shot, right? It says, oh God, thank you very much. Can I have another? Oh yeah, I forgot. I had one other thing. And you think like you're down and out. You're down and out. And what does God want more than anything else? What does he want? He wants you to say, I'm in charge. And that no matter what happens, I'm going to serve you. Yeah. Now, does that mean that a person is going to be like, they're going to be walking on eggshells in their best behavior? Maybe. Are they going to try and fix things up in their lives? Maybe. Some may just sit in the ground and cry because they just don't know what to do. Right. And they're in pain. Okay. Yeah. But at the same time, what does God want? Right? What is the purpose of any trial? The purpose of any trial is, how am I going to react? If God gives me a windfall, am I going to be thankful? Am I going to help others with it? Am I going to take mice? Am I going to give 20%? Yeah. And if I'm down to my last piece of bread, I don't know what's going to be. You don't know what's going to be, today, tomorrow, whatever. I'm going to be thankful for that last piece of bread. Now that's a lot harder to do. Because old Mother Hubbard ain't nothing in the cupboard. Credit cards maxed out. No one's helping, right? You feel like, well, what's going to be? Not a way to live. Not going to say it's an easy way to live. Certainly not. But, sometimes people have no choice. I know of a story, some people down and out, they instead of sleeping in a hotel for whatever, they slept in the car. That's what they did. They had no money, couldn't do anything about it. And whatever. So you tell me, well, these things can break people. Yes, they can break people. Is that what God wants? No. No. But we learn from experiences. It makes us stronger. It should make us stronger. Now, as Reb Biederman said, does that mean it's going to make you strong every second of every day? And you're going to be, you're going to be walking out, skipping, skipping around and jumping around and be all excited? Probably not. Probably not. At the same time, if you don't have a problem with your lungs, you're breathing in good air, you're eating, you're satiated, whatever, some better, some worse, you're doing all right. Yeah, it doesn't matter wherever you live, even if it doesn't belong to you. That's not even the point. You got a roof over your head. There are, 1.5 million things to be thankful for. The problem is, as we always say, get beaten down alive. Right? But he says it's okay. Right? It's okay over here not always to be in an upright mood. Yeah? Because you suffer. Okay. But he says, what am I thankful for? What do I look forward to? Let's say better, what am I living for? That's the point, is that even if it's hard, we're holding on to God with everything we have. And the reason is because we have nothing else. And sometimes that is the whole point. During the Holocaust, that was the main point. Is what did God show to man, to the Jewish people? You cannot rely on man. You think, oh, the Germans are going to be so helpful, this and that. No. We joined the army, married your women, we did this, we did that. They said, I don't care. They killed them all. Killed as many as they could. Yeah, but we're part of you. Doesn't matter. The one thing we saw from the Holocaust, beyond the shadow of a doubt, man's inhumanity of man. That the only being you have to rely on is God himself. That's the only being you have to rely on. Right? So when the chips are down, and what's the first thing we do? What's the first thing Jews do when there's tragedy? You say Tehillim. You pray. You learn more. You take on something, even if it's small. You can say, how's that going to have an effect in the world? How do you know how it affect? Tehillim always has an effect, right? Psalms always have an effect, whether it does, even if it doesn't necessarily help you, it can certainly help others, right? There's no question. So at the same time, a person has to realize, that what I'm living for, is not an ideal. I'm living 100%, for the sake of what God wants for me, to the best of my ability. Now, we all want to kick back, sip pina coladas, and everything's great. Livelihood comes in the way it should. Our kids do, if we're married, do what they should. Families do what they should. Everything's great. Well, I don't know what planet anyone dropped in. Yeah, that's not usually the way it works. Even if other things are good, you always have something that's nagging. You always have, you can have great livelihood and your kids are, let's say not so great, or your family's not so great, or, you have health issues or whatever. Something is going to give, but what's the point? The point is to make you grow. Now, does it have to be that hard? I'm not God, so I'm not playing them on TV either, right? But, we have to realize that what we do matters. And not only what we do matters, the closer we want to be to the king. Now our status changes. We're not potato farmers in Idaho, right? No offense. Anyone's a potato farmer, grew up in Idaho, knowing nothing about nothing. Now you want to be close to the king. There's payback. There is going to be payback. We're going to say it's not fair. It's not a question of fair. You want to be close to the king. You want your actions to matter. You want every last thing you think about to matter. I have to think about what I say. I have to think about what I think. I have to think about how we interact with others. Isn't that real life? That's what real life is, not just say what I want, do what I want, go where I want. There are repercussions. I'm not saying everything's a direct repercussion, right? I think a lot of it is, not necessarily direct, but, a person's going to pay for whatever, for what they've done unless they seriously repent, right? But at the same time, what's the purpose? The purpose is to fix ourselves. The purpose is for us to get the message. Yeah, we're a stiff-necked people, so God has to slam us. And, until we get the message, till we say uncle, until we realize there's no one else out there except for him. That's what we have to realize. And every second of every day we should be saying, ain't no mavadali. There's no one else out there except him. He's the one in control, no matter how bad it looks. Because no matter how bad it looks, things that are bad can turn out good. Things that are good can turn out bad. We don't know, right? We don't know. Somebody mentions the whole no separate laws for the stranger amongst you. So again, let's ask the question, what does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean? If a stranger's among you, meaning a non-Jew, how can the laws between Jews and non-Jews be the same? They can't. It could be in certain things, maybe they're similar, not going to be totally similar, but they cannot be 100% the same, right? It has to be in certain cases. And that makes sense because they're Jews and non-Jews. If the law was supposed to be equal, then there would be no Jews. Everyone would be the same, right? But that's not the case. You have Kohanim from the tribe of Levi. They can't do what Levites do. Levites can't do what Kohanim do. And Yisrael, everybody else, can't do what either do. Forget about non-Jews, right? That's just within the Jewish people. The non-Jews also going to be different, right? Why should the law be the same? That's why it has to be understood in the context. The law cannot be the same, right? By definition. Meaning no additional or lesser of the laws someone on just is near or visiting. Why does that have to do with them visiting or not? Why does that have to do if they visit or not? Shouldn't have anything to do with it. It's not a question of proximity, right? In other words, if it applies, right? If it applies, tell me it applies across the board, wherever they are. Oh, you're gonna tell me they live amongst the Jewish people. Good, that's what you mean, right? They live amongst the Jewish people, right? Ger Tosha, right? Who's a non-Jew who goes against idolatry or keeps the no-hide laws, right? Big question exactly what a Ger Toshav is, but that's not the point here either. They live in proximity, very good. So maybe there's certain things that are similar. Okay. Yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe there are certain things, right, that are similar. But you cannot tell me by definition, just because they live near us, that they're all going to be the same. Some things, yeah, they could be similar in some ways. Not going to be similar 100%. But where do you see in that verse, according to logic, we're talking about Torah logic here. According to Torah logic, where does it show me that all the laws apply equally? You'll tell me it says in the verse. That's what you're going to tell me, right? You're going to tell me clear it says in the verse. Okay, right? But it doesn't. All the Torah says, right? All the Torah says is all the Torah says is what? All the Torah says is it's the same. Right? Now, logically, can it be the same in everything? I would say no. How do I know? Because there are different laws for Jews and non-Jews. Right? Maybe in some things, but certainly not everything. All right, someone says, can I use the light from the bathroom to say Birkas Hamazon on Shabbos? Yeah, as long as you're not in the bathroom. Right? You can leave the oh, it's a good question. One second. You can't be in the bathroom, obviously, when you do it. Can you get benefit from the light even if it comes from the bathroom? Yeah. That shouldn't be a problem. What if you do if you can't avoid touching women in my job? Well, I get to work on that. You're going to have to explain outright they just can't touch women. According to the Chazon Ish from Yisrael, Avram Mishai Karo, to bless the memory, it's the status of Harigo Yavu, you have to give up your life. Now, if it's that drastic, I don't care if, we mentioned before, if the person's a 90-year-old dried up prune. No offense to any 90-year-olds or dried up prunes. Yeah, it doesn't matter. That, you have to die. You have to die. According to Chazon Ish. Others are not so, others are not so lenient either. Not the only one. All right? So you got to figure out a way. You have to figure out a way how to get around the problem. Either you have to put your hands behind your back and you bow and you say, so nice to meet you, whatever. Sorry, I'm not a shaker. You can say, sorry, I'm gay. I don't know you want to say that, right? That'd be a good answer, though. Say, sorry, whatever. And I don't think that go over so well. But I don't know, maybe it will. But you have to explain. You have to say, I'm so sorry that, it's no offense. I only shake hands with ugly women. I only hug ugly women. And what do you do if someone hugs you? There's nothing to do. You can't really hug them back. You just like stand there like, I don't know. As Kaufman would say, like a doofus, just stand there. Yeah. You can't hug them back. And it's a problem. You have to figure out a way around the problem. Right? You have no choice. I don't know. There are plenty of people that it's a hard thing. I'm not gonna say no. It's not an easy thing. in this world today, especially if you work in mixed company. But you have to explain straight away. There's no other way. There's no other way to get around the problem. It's okay to skip prayers in minyan and pray alone. I mean, if you're a convert, if you're a Jew, you got to pray with a minyan. Now, I would say it's better, it's better to say fewer prayers with more intention than more prayers with less intention. But I would say the most important things to say with a minyan, with 10 men, if you're a guy, is the Shema and Shemona Esrei. So whatever you have to do to catch up or say fewer things, those things you should say with the minyan. Those things for sure you should say with the minyan. Right? Everything else, you can go at your own pace. But you have to answer also. Certain things, Baruch Hu, you have to answer. Kedusha, unless you're in the middle of Shmon Esrei, you have to answer, if possible. But at the very least, the Shema and Shmon Esrei should be said together with the minyan. Everything else you want to say, slow or whatever, it's your choice, right? But what are you doing after read? Monday and Thursday, you read the Torah or in Shabbos, yeah. So that comes before, yeah. So at the very least, you say the Shema, you say Shmon Esrei, and then you have to hear the Torah. Now, what about saying prayers? You can say I can hear the Torah at the same time. No, that you shouldn't do. That for sure you shouldn't do because you won't concentrate. Right? That's why a person, let's say in Shmon Esrei of the morning and the afternoon, where it's repeated. Yeah, some people, looking up things, or reading different things. That's a problem, right? Even the greatest of people, sometimes do this, but it's a problem. The reason it's a problem because you have to answer Amen. You have to hear the blessings. I heard the blessing. I can answer Amen, do both at the same time. Not the same. Right? I see people do it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying, I like what I see. But in general, you can't do two things at once. You say, I'm hearing with one ear. That's the point. You need to hear with both. Right? You need at least 10 people paying attention to the words. So you say, let someone else do it. Right? It shouldn't be done. You should be the one listening. Forget about what everyone else is going to do. You got to do what's right. Is it necessary to find a local rabbi? Yes. That was easy. I mean, if it's possible. I mean, someone needs a sponsoring rabbi, right? Let's say. So you have a sponsoring rabbi, good. But yeah, you got to find someone local that, will vouch for you. It's not going to be so easy in some places, right? They have to get to know you and everything else. But, it is good to have someone in person. You can get to, you can speak to. Again, people are busy also. It's not so easy, but you have to have people you connect to. You have to have rabbis you connect to. They can have a connection to, right? So that even if it's not a sponsoring rabbi per se, right? But someone, it's not so easy. I mean, not so easy, but it should be done. Doesn't Hashem want everyone to know him? Yeah, so what? That's true. But he wants to know, what do we say in Psalm 150? God wants people to call out to him in truth. Aren't there a lot of people call out? Call the name of JC, show a little fat guy, Mr. Buddha. They'll call out in Krishna's name and this one's name and who knows what else name. But he wants them to call out in truth. I want these bubbas calling him out. Come on, Bubba Ray. What do you got to say? Go on, Buddha, what do you got to say? No. He wants people to call out in truth. He wants people to have a connection, right? We mentioned before, a very fundamental principle. Yeah, the unbelievable thing, the Or Chaim says, the Or Chaim HaKadosh says, and we mentioned this before, I think we spent many weeks going through this, and the fact is it's in every single person's DNA, Jew or non-Jew. Every single person's DNA, they have the ability to draw close to God, because God put it in their DNA. Why do you think there are 80,000 different religions in the world? But doesn't God want to seek him out? The real God? Yes. Can people get carried away, make mistakes? Okay. Does God want them to make mistakes? No. He doesn't want you to make mistakes. Okay. So why do so many people make mistakes? You want me to answer that? I don't think, anyone can answer that. You don't need me to answer that. People hear what they want to hear. People hear what makes sense to them. And most of the world is brainwashed. You got, a third of the world that are Christian, brainwashed, totally brainwashed. You got another third of the world that, bowing to cows and this and that are also brainwashed. Then you got communists and atheists, and we're also, brainwashed in different ways. God doesn't want that. But He created everyone with a brain. He gave us the ability to reason, right? He put in the spirit of a person, the Ruach Mamala, the ability to speak. Very good. The ability to speak means to reason, to make decisions. God want everyone worshiping cows? I don't think so. I mean, I had someone tell me it's so horrific. All these people are going to get wiped out. It's idolatry. I said, yeah, well, what should we do? It's terrible. I said, you're right. What should we do? God gave everyone a brain. I get contacting people all the time. I don't know. Some of them are more serious than others from that part of the world. They can get out of it if they want to. They have enough access, they can get out of it. Yeah. But you say, what do you want? If you were living in communist China, you'd be waving Mao's flag. You'd be waving the flag. Okay. Who says you can't get out of it? God gave you a brain to say it makes sense or doesn't make sense. Should I do it or I shouldn't do it? But you say, when I got brainwashed by society. So if I playing God now, put on my funny George Burns class, my funny mustache, and someone's going to come upstairs after they die, and I'm going to look at their files and wow, look at all these terrible things you did over here. You're bowing down to cows, and you're doing this, and all kinds of things. What could I do? It's so prevalent in my society. I get brainwashed. You know what I would say? And watch Family Feud. Survey says, who said that? Who told you to get brainwashed? I gave you a brain. I gave you the ability to make decisions. Yeah, but if I didn't do this, I wasn't part of it. I ostracized from my family. People would kill me. Clan killings, this, that. I have to run away from them. Okay, you want the true God or you want fantasy? But it's so hard and whatever. Okay, let me show you what you could have done. See, this is part of what Ganem is. The Zohar says. God's going to play the second movie. What's the second movie? The first movie is everything you did. Everything you thought, even when you thought it was safe to read National Geographic in the bathroom, right? Everything you did. Every last thing you did, you thought, okay. Then God plays the second movie, right? The first movie is bad enough. Then God plays the second movie. What's the second movie? It's going to show you why you went through what you did, where you made wrong, where your decisions were wrong, and what you could have become. Now, why is that harder to watch? Because you're going to see what stupid mistakes you made, what the ramifications were, and what you could have been, and how you could have reached greater potential, and what your real potential was. And then you're going to kick yourself and say, give me another chance. Too late, right? Reincarnated soul's gone, right? No one's coming back anymore. That's it. Too late. Now you have to pay the price. That's more embarrassing. That's part of what Ganem is, that absolute embarrassment of knowing absolute truth, and you blew it. And you blew it in a major way. God said, I didn't tell you to be a communist. Said you want everyone else as a communist and an atheist. You're going to fall the peg. You'd be like everyone else. He said, listen, if you're not a communist, you die. They send you to Siberia. They kill you. You want truth? You want to fight for truth? How do you know I wouldn't have helped you? How do you know I wouldn't have saved you? Let me show you what you could have done. Imagine communist Russia. Yeah, this person could have fought against it. God's going to show him what he could have done. God's going to show him what he could have taken him out of and what he could have become. Yeah, if that person was living, he'd be on his knees in tears. In tears. I don't know how pure soul takes it. That's embarrassment. Total embarrassment. You're going to say, we're not expected to be so great. God has a lot of potential for us. Tremendous amount of potential. Can never rest on your laurels. Ever. Right? You don't know what your potential is. You have no idea how strong our potential can be. Could be. That's why, God has to squeeze us like the bottom of the toothpaste to get that potential out of us. Okay. But imagine if God showed you step by step. This guy, I mean, this guy, soul, whatever. And he says, you should have done this. Then you would have done this. Then I would have helped you with this. And you would have got to this. And you would have got out of it. But God says, sorry. And that didn't happen. And the person, like, staggering. I'm not, you do this as a pure soul. I mean, I don't know how much more embarrassed you get than seeing it right in front of your face. And God's going to do it to everyone. He's going to show you, oh, you thought this, and then you did this, and the repercussions for this. And it's a scary proposition to live and to die. Very scary proposition. So this was ground into my head many, many years ago, right? About potential. And you have no idea what potential is. I told the story last week. Famous story, the deceiver of Naftali Tzvi Berliner, who became the head of yeshiva of Volozhin with Rav Chaim of Volozhin Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, after Rav Chaim Volozhin passed away. As a child, he's a rambunctious child. And over his parents saying, I don't know what we're going to do with this kid. He never wants to learn. We're going to find him an apprentice, whatever. He has a dream. Now, you can ask a question on the dream. He had a dream because he was a child, right? Normally, you don't get judged in the heavenly court, but he saw he's getting judged in the heavenly court. So basically, there was a scale. There was a big scale. And said, okay, bring out all those mitzvahs, right? Every time you do a mitzvah, we're going to get to that in Pirkei Avos one day. I don't know when, maybe about 85. Hopefully, we'll get there. It says every time you do a mitzvah, you create an angel. Now, sometimes you create a strong angel, a weak angel, depending on how you did the mitzvah, right? So train loads of these white angels, right? Pure angels come out, very good. They go on the side of one scale. He's feeling pretty good. Train loads of mitzvahs, very good. Yeah, no more mitzvahs. Okay, bring out all those transgressions. Now, did all those transgressions, black angels, right? Kind of like angels of destruction. Right, so they jump on the other side of the scale. So meanwhile, they're jumping on the scale, some stronger, some weaker. However, he did the transgression, and the white angels start to come up. He's getting a little bit nervous, right? Black angels, going down, 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 down. White angels start to come out, almost a little bit even, right? He's getting more nervous. Black angels want to rip him to shreds. And then he hears the Basco, then he hears the heavenly voice. And the heavenly voice says, okay, bring out the Emek HaDavar. Emek HaDavar is the book that the Netziv wrote on Chumash. Bring out the Emek HaShela, right? Another book that he wrote. Bring out the Marume Sadeh, a commentary he wrote on the entire Gemara. And these huge volumes come out, walking over to the side of transgression. It's like, wait, what are these books? What are these books? I don't know what these books are. Here's another heavenly voice. Heavenly voice says, these are the books you were supposed to write in your lifetime. But since you're not going in that right path, you're never going to write them that goes on the side of, the side of sin. And as the scale's about to break, he wakes up. That was his dream. And he wakes up. So at that point, runs to his parents. He's like, Mom, Dad, I'm ready for the teacher. Let's go. The next day, I'm ready. And he learned, and he learned, and he learned, and he learned, and that's how he became the Netziv. He became inspired by that dream that scared the absolute dickens out of him. Yeah? That's what potential is. There's no idea inside a person. Imagine, 7-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid, it's like lighting his Rebbe on fire. I don't know, playing all kinds of pranks, like kids can do. But he had much greater potential. But at this point, he ain't reaching that potential. You're not even coming close to that potential. So normally, you only get judged for what you're holding. Okay. So you can ask a question on that. We learned that out from Yishmael, that, the angels say, let him die, but he's not guilty. Right? The end of the verse says, Bashir Husham, where he's holding right now, where he is. Meaning, you can't kill him. He's a child. Is he guilty? No. Can't kill him. Well, look what he's going to do. Look what his offspring going to do to the Jewish people. Okay, you're right, but you can't kill him. Still can't kill him. Okay. Now, you could ask that question. Oops. You could ask that question. You can say you don't judge according to the future. Okay, that was his dream. Right? That was his dream. Imagine Adam Netziv not gone in that path. Imagine if he became some sort of, I don't know, he became a tailor. He became I don't know, a shoe repairman. Right? He worked on shoes. Who knows? Whatever he did, whatever he's gonna be. We would have lost all that Torah. But it's not just the Torah we would have lost. He would have lost that potential. I heard that story many years ago. Many, many years ago. That story made an unbelievable impression. And that means you have no idea. We have no idea the power of the soul. We have no idea what the power of our potential is. No idea what a person can accomplish. Yeah, no idea. So you can't rest on your laurels. Yeah. So what about everybody else? Doesn't everybody want the truth? What did we say before? The Gemara says, you want to go on the right path, God will help you. You want to go on the wrong path, it won't stop you. The ones who will come close to God, the real God, will want the truth. And God will give them the truth. And God will send someone on their path, someone to them to teach them. I hear this, all the time. People think I'm like a divine gift somehow. Like, oh, I was praying on this. All of a sudden, you sent me an email. All of a sudden, I saw one of your videos. All of a sudden, whatever. Don't be a groupie. Get over it. Yeah, but person wants help. They want the real thing. They'll find it. I'm not saying it's gonna be so easy sometimes, but if you want the truth, you find it, right? Doesn't God if the Or Chaim HaKadosh says if the DNA in a person, in every single person, Jew or non-Jew, is to come close to God. It's not a coincidence there are 80,000 different religions. So what happened? How come everyone veered off? So you can answer why. And many answers. Yeah, they didn't really want the truth. They wanted something maybe sounded like the truth, something that fit the world interests. I don't know, world outlook, whatever. They want to be too hard. Come up with a lot of different reasons. God wants us to draw close to Him. That's the point. But don't people, get off kilter? Sure. Don't people go off the deep end and find other things they shouldn't? Yeah. Don't they get brainwashed? Okay. But who says you should get brainwashed? I hear this all the time. I'm an individual. I have to listen to anyone. Okay. But you're still brainwashed by society. Right? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, by nature, but like you look at what some people say and what people are doing, it's unbelievable. Like looking in two different worlds. It's like, you have a jug that's totally full, right? Almost to the top. Someone says, no, it's not. Actually, it's pretty empty. I don't know. It looks pretty full to me. And they'll give you like 10 different reasons why really it's a whole charade and it's really empty. How can you look at the same thing, come up with like two like diametrically opposed things? You can say, well, it's politics. Very good. Yeah. Someone says, go to many Jews, you're a dirty guy, nobody cares about your relationship with Hashem. Who cares what other people think? Get this out of your head. Doesn't matter what they think. You have to have your relationship with God, and so do they. Yeah, if they're going to say things, so let them say it. It's their problem. It's not your problem. You're like, oh, I feel bad when they say it. Okay. But again, you have to have your relationship. You don't have to answer for them. They have to answer for themselves. Right? But, they have to have their relationship. So what kind of relationship they have when they say that? Good. Good. That's a good question. That's between them and God. That's not your question. That's not your question. You have to do what you need to do. Right? Regardless of what anyone else may or may not say. Sticks and stones. If I would have cared about what people said, and it's a good thing I'm 6,000 miles away, right? But if I would have cared back in the day what people said, and I'm not going to go through what some people said, and I wouldn't be half the person I am today. Yeah? Does anybody want you? Oh, dirty goy. Let me tell you better. I don't know if it's better. Let me tell you better. I think it's better. Yeah, or different. Yeah, imagine going somewhere and you have a family member tell you to your face, not embarrassed, and they say, it's really well, let me think of the language here. Embarrassing, that's the word. It's really embarrassing being seen the way you dress in public. I'm like, what's the matter with the way I dress? Now, I'm not gonna say where I was at the time. Probably shouldn't have been dressed the way I was and whatever. Okay, it's a good point. But imagine someone, a family member says to your face, it's embarrassing to be seen with you in public. You want to say dirty goy's up there? Okay. You think I'm going to care one iota what this piece of dirt's going to say? You think it's going to matter? Ain't going to matter one instant. Because you know what? We're all creating God's image. This person's going to be in serious trouble. Not just saying that. Plenty of other things. Yeah? How do you think that makes a person feel? Right? Good. Now I'm doing my own psychotherapy here. Yeah? How does that make a person feel? Make you feel like a piece of dirt, right? Make you feel like, oh, you're nothing. And you'll never be anything. And you're dressed funny and your community's funny. And, go down the list of things somebody could say. Someone makes fun and says, if I breathe on your food, does it mean it's not kosher? Kind of obnoxious thing to say. So, I'm just kidding, whatever. I said, no, my answer was no, it's kosher. It's got bad breath on it. Isn't that hurtful? And it's spiteful. Is it trying to knock someone down? But you know what? Doesn't matter. Person has an IQ like a jackass. I hate to use that as an expression. Yeah? That's what they have an IQ of a 5-year-old. I don't care, a person got an MBA, got a PhD, pilot iron deeper, Papa has dough. These things should never be said. Why are they said? To put someone down. Yeah? So now, you fill in the blank. What's worse? You think that's worse? Or you think this is worse? So you say, okay, my own situation's worse. Okay. Right? You can say that. Plenty of things. Plenty of things people have said. Yeah, I mentioned one of the things. I'm not going to mention what it was. And the person absolutely lied. I never said that. Like, what do you mean you never said it? You just said it. They denied it. Something, let's say, well below the belt. Yeah? Is it painful? Give one iota, who cares? It's good therapy for getting it out. Okay. But what's the point? The point is these people have a 5-year-old IQ. And they should be put in an insane asylum. Are going to take what they say seriously? Yeah. Like someone said, why couldn't you pray in the bathroom? Is that one of the rules? I said, yeah. End of story. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't need to say anything. That was the end of the story. Put them right in their place. Isn't that obnoxious just to make fun? Yeah, it's obnoxious. Should we be speaking to people like this? No. It's a waste of time. I'll just get you all riled up. Okay. I don't think about it. I've had enough things said that it doesn't matter. We knew you'd be like this. You were a fanatic then, you're a fanatic now. Okay. I have 7 kids and 9 grandkids. Been in Israel 29 the last 32 years. Doing something I absolutely love to do. What do you have? What do you have in your life? Nothing. Nothing. Doing the same stupid things you were doing 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Yeah. You can say whatever you want about me. That's fine. Yeah. What do you have? Who are you? Yeah. You want to make fun? Make fun. Take it seriously. Take it to heart. You're going to say, oh, these are like religious community members, this and that. They shouldn't be saying it. Bottom line, they shouldn't be saying it. Yeah. What's going to be with them? That's not your problem. Go deal with them. I'll tell you another story. Somebody, it didn't happen to me. Somebody walking in a certain city Friday night, and whatever his dodgers were like, throwing stuff at them, calling them names, different things. And this guy, this friend of mine was with somebody who was a convert. Yeah. And he was singing and dancing. It's like, didn't you hear what they said to us? What they threw at us. And he's like, they didn't even know I'm a convert. They didn't even know I was a non-Jew before. Different way of looking at things. Yeah. So you can tell me, you can tell me, well, wait a minute. He's also a Jew, right? You also felt it, but guess what? What did he feel first? He felt the fact that even though he was a non-Jew first. He didn't think about what they said. You know, think about what a bunch of drunks say. Yeah. But you gotta say, but this hurts, it's painful. You got, you got people like to say it's wrong. I'm not gonna say not. It's wrong. 100%. If they believe it's wrong. Okay. You got plenty of bad eggs out there. I'm not saying not. But that's part of the process. That will be part of the process. Right? Not for everyone. Some more, some less. But yeah, that's welcome to being a Jew. Yeah, part of the process. I'm not agreeing with it. As someone who was already far enough in the process, they wanted to show, they wanted to show they were in control. They said, hey, turn off the light for me. They're already far enough in the process, they shouldn't have done it. But they're not Jewish. So that's this person like, why'd you do that? Said, I want to show. I want to show who they are. Well, they know who they are. They know exactly who they are. I'm not talking about using them as the Shabbos goy and whatever. Lights went out, this didn't work, whatever. Okay. Not talking about that. Some level. Put someone in their place. Show them who they are. They know who they are. Isn't that a bit much? Yes. 100%. What do you have to remind them? You don't think, they look in the mirror, they look Chinese, they look Asian. Yeah. They look Indian. You don't think they know? And when they convert, they're still gonna look the same. The person of color, that ain't changing. They're gonna look exactly the same. So you're black. Thank you very much. I didn't realize that. I thought it was just like, skin type. Yeah, I thought you could just wash it off. Of course they know that. Are you an idiot? Do you need to rub it in their face? I wouldn't say that. I think you get to remind sometimes certain things. Okay. I wouldn't go that far. Now, this person said they wanted to show. Okay. I don't think most people would agree. Unless they deserved it. Unless they deserve something like that. Okay, if they're out of line or whatever, maybe. You have a right to do that. Degrade somebody. So the person, this person called me up and said, like, we don't turn on things anymore. Where did we pass that? Yeah. So I never answer why people do things. Right? It's one of the questions I never answer. Because anyone else can give their own spin on it as much as I could. So on this, I would say either it's upmanship or it's showing who's in control. Yeah. Sometimes rabbis think, like, they're in control. They can do whatever they want, blackmail, this, that. It's wrong. That 100% is wrong. People find out. Sometimes that's what people do. And it's 100% wrong. Sometimes you just have to deal with it. I don't know. It's a very hard thing. But at the end of the day, it should be done. It's forbidden to be done. People get taken advantage of when they should not be. Yeah. So why do people do it? Why do you think they do it? Power, ego, or as we say here, ego. I'm the one calling the shots. That's the problem also. Yeah, you're on the outside looking in. They're the ones calling the shots, right? That's just the way it is. In some places, I would tell people never to convert because it's a problem. This is the problem. One of the problems. Yeah, without mentioning, without mentioning, the place where it is. But again, anyone in this process, whether you're a JIT, a Jew in training, a Noahide, whatever someone is, you're gonna have to have thick skin. Bottom line. But you'll tell me, you know what? Sometimes it gets annoying. I agree. I'll tell you, but in certain relationships, certain things, okay, if you play the game, you do what you should do. Very good. You know what? Sometimes you get sick of playing the game. And then you say, all right, I'm just not doing this anymore. I'm not talking about leaving Torah mitzvahs, like whatever. You don't want to do it anymore. So don't talk to the person for a little bit. Like, oh, what's the matter? This and that. Then you have to get back into the game. It's a game. But you know what? The game is annoying. It's annoying. Yeah. So what do? Either you play the game the best of your ability, or you get out. Sometimes you can't get out. Sometimes you're stuck. Right? But it is what it is. And you can say, thank God I'm bigger than this. Thank God I know what's going on. I'm not going to let it affect me. Because it's not worth it. People don't deserve the worth to be in your head. Not for 5 minutes, not for 5 years. I told the story last week. I think it was in spiritual coaching I mentioned. Yeah. Someone's got, serious anger issues. And a hang up, something happened 10 years, 15 years ago. Sorry, 15 years ago. I told the person straight away, go see someone. And if you were left holding the bag, and no one empathized, no one in the family, no one this, no one that, but you understand they're not capable, right? That was the whole point. You understand that they're not capable. So what are you getting upset about? The initial thing you get upset about. Okay. But this person has the IQ, the spiritual IQ of a dimwit, of a 5-year-old. Why in the world are you going to care after so many years? Get it out of your system. Deal with it. Go for therapy, something. But if someone doesn't have the ability to empathize, let's say, in something like that, no matter what happened to a person, no matter how tragic it was, you're never going to teach them how to empathize. There was someone who's narcissist. Good luck. You're in their world. Yeah? You're in their world. Now, being in their world, you got to deal with their things. They don't care about you, most likely. They'll say, oh, what's new, this and that, and they talk about themselves. Okay. And that's sad? Yes. It's going to change? No. Why is not? Because it's not going to change. But if you realize they're not capable of change, and they will never change, well, guess what? I'm not wasting my time. I'm not getting emotionally involved. There's no point. Yeah. So this person's still rip roaring mad 15 years later. 15 years. Anger. Serious anger. Yeah. I get where the anger's coming from, but for goodness sakes, you can move on. If I didn't have Torah, yeah. You also have anger at different things. Okay, so what? Doesn't help you. But it made me realize many years ago, yeah, there's some people, first of all, never going to change. They have other issues. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. There's nobody home. You can't expect somebody to empathize if they don't have an empathized bone in their body. It's an impossibility. You can't expect that. Well, I do. Okay. Yeah. Saw a few people today on the bus, right? Always good stories on the bus. Definitely mentally challenged. I like no question about it. Yeah, in different ways. Okay. A little bit annoying. This and that. Some, people like stayed away from them, kind of scary a little bit. Okay. At the end of the day, they're mentally challenged. You're not going to change them. You're not going to change they have a 5 IQ. Oh, you can change how they interact with others a little bit. You can teach them how to do certain things. Okay. But they're limited. So why don't we look at other people like that as being limited? That's my $1 million advice. They're limited in so many ways. And maybe shallow in so many ways. You gonna change that? You're never gonna change that. Try and convince a Democrat to be Republican in America. Good luck. Forget about Trump. Everyone, anything he says is bad, right? So we're not gonna mention him. No politics, right? But think about it. You think someone's gonna change one to the other? Dramatically? No. They're stuck in their ways. Okay. That's who they are. You're gonna come up with some great idea? You got one senator, 6'8" senator, or whatever, almost 2 meters. That's Democrat, but he's very pro-Israel. And like, sick and tired of these leftist Democrats like coming out against Israel. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. He's not gonna, you're not changing to be a Republican. by any stretch, but he's a Democrat. Okay. Maybe it will eventually. He's a great friend of Israel, no question. And Democratic Party. You don't have too many of them. Yeah. Pretty amazing. But someone someone going to change dramatically? No. So what do you expect? You can't expect anything. To say, I hate this expression, expect nothing whatever you get as a bonus. But if someone is not capable, you cannot sledgehammer them and think, or even try and deal with them in any way, shape, or form and think they're going to see your wavelength. They're not going to see it. They will not. It's a hard reality, but they're not going to see it. And you shouldn't think they're going to see it. But if you have unusual expectations and you demand that they see it, they're never going to see it. It's such a waste of time and a waste of energy. To hold the grudge, which is forbidden, Torah prohibition, this person's a Jew, Torah prohibition, 15 years. I can agree with everything the person says. It doesn't change anything. If someone's not capable, they're not capable, period. And they're not going to change. And that's it. In this case, they're mentally challenged. You have to deal with them like they're mentally challenged. They don't think they did anything wrong. That's it. Or like someone said to me, like, this has already been done. Did that change anything? But it's still on my money. It's been done already. You're right. And didn't change anything. Nice statement, but it doesn't change anything. Like, the past is the past. Okay. I get it. I moved on. A long time ago. Yeah. No apology, no nothing. But the past is the past. The past is the past. Can't live in the past. Yeah, I don't have to embrace its future. A big difference, right? But anyway, we're not going. Someone says, good my psychoanalysis here. Is it possible Jews are cursed? Why are they cursed? Suffering baseless hate, God's not cursed. Who says they're cursed? God's beloved. Can't say they're cursed, right? Isn't it true if we transgress, punishment that's going to come out? Measure for measure, even if we don't understand it. See, if you're close to the king, you get burnt. So the closer you are to the king, even something minor could be catastrophic. Because that means our actions matter. Even if 90%, the Jewish people don't do what they're supposed to do. Okay. Well, we know better. They're going to say, oh, the Lashon Hara, this and that. Yeah, even within our own community. Forget about secular Jews. They don't know any better. They know absolutely no better. Right? It's what we have to do better. But don't you understand? Not about being cursed. We're God's chosen people. You're right. Why do Jewish people suffer so much? If a parent has to punish a child for infractions, sometimes it might have to be severe. What's the difference? I guess we don't understand. You're right. We don't understand. The only thing we do understand is this reward and punishment. That's what we understand. Second paragraph of the Shema. You do the right thing, everything's good. You do the wrong thing, it's payback. So what do you expect? We're the only ones get like that. Non-Jews will get their payback. Don't get me wrong. But we have that special relationship. The closer you are to the king, the harder it is. So that's why we're tossed around all the time. You want to be more like the non-Jews? Oh, you think Berlin is the next Jerusalem? Well, let's see. Let's see how far that's going to get you. You're going to intermarry, you're going to do this, it'll be payback. Who says we're cursed? It's not a question of being cursed. It's a question of not doing what God says. That's not being cursed. Yeah, you're being paid back for what you did wrong. That's a big difference. That's a huge difference. Let me see other questions here. 1 second. Why does Hashem coerce Israel accepting the Torah? Yeah, with people dying from fear. Why did not come with love, nice weather, and music? In order to teach the Jewish people, guess what? You want to keep Torah mitzvahs? Self-sacrifice. Not going to be all, it's all about, playing the banjo and singing Kumbaya and all that. That's great. That's all what Torah is. Torah is about hard work. Torah's about self-sacrifice. Torah's about you want to, one of the three things that are hard to acquire: Torah, Olam Haba, next world, and Eretz Yisrael. You want to acquire Torah, you got to fight. You got to be given. You have to have fear. Yeah, nice music not going to cut it. You got to know. You got to know what the real deal is, right? Nice music be nice. Sun would be nice. Yeah, got to have a certain atmosphere. Why do you give it with thunder and lightning? Why did the experience was so great? They all died. You bring them back to life. Because they had to see. They had to experience. They had to feel the fear. Yeah, because that's what drives the person to draw close. Not just because you're going to fry now forever, right? But you need love. 100% you need love, right? But I think as King Solomon says, what's the beginning of wisdom is fear. So you need fear. Fear is the base. Not the only thing, but it's the base. What comes with fear? Self-sacrifice. Going beyond the letter of the law. Doing it to please your creator. Sometimes we don't do things the way we should, we get tossed around. Yeah? If everything would be so easy, everyone's going to want to join. That's what God wanted. Right? So you got to pay a price. There is a price, not a question of curse or anything else. Right? You do the right thing, things are good. You do the wrong thing, there's payback. Don't you think it could be worse? State of the Jewish people as it is now. Don't you think it could be a lot worse? Yeah, October 7th is pretty bad. Yeah. There's been massacres, pogroms throughout history. Yeah. What's the lesson? God's a vengeful God? God just wants the bad for his people? No. He wants people to obey. He wants them to keep what they should keep. And if you don't, there'll be serious payback. People at different levels, but the closer you are, that's the whole point. The closer you are to the king, then the worse it is. Because the closer you are, God looks at you in a totally different way. And God's going to say, oh, you look better without a head. Oh, you thought this was intention? Bam. But I was trying. I was really trying, So your level, he wants more. So what's better? Live life fantasy? Or, go through suffering and hardship, but actually living life. That's living life. I'm not saying you have to suffer all the time. What do I mean living life? That everything I do matters. What I think matters. My actions matter. Everything matters. It's a different way of looking at the world. Someone asks if people speak to us in insulting manner, rather than just leave or move away from the insulting people. So either change the conversation or you move away, right? Or you try to stay the conversation. If you can't stay the conversation, right, then yeah, you just try and get away if you can. You're supposed to feel sorry for them. You don't have to put up with it, right? But on the other hand, if a person says, could you work harder, not, cursing around me, they may curse more. Right? You have people like that say, oh, you tell me not to do this, I'll do it more. Right? No, you see this, I'll say it by dress even better. Yeah, you see the way people dress, and, especially women when it's hot, you feel sorry for them. That, they have to underexpose themselves to get people to look at them. Or to want to get people to look at them. That's pretty pathetic, right? But that's society. Yeah, I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't know. That's that's obvious. I think it's pathetic, but that's what goes on. Total exploitation, and they exploit themselves as well. Well, how are you going to get someone to like you? Well, you act in a certain way, you dress in a certain way, and yeah, people like you. I'm not saying you have to put up with it. I mean, just try and ignore it, try and walk away from it. That's a question like, you hear people speaking Lashon Hara, this and that, you don't want to be around it. Yeah, try and change the subject, try and walk away. If not, and you hear it, you can't believe it 100%. Right? But, all these things, in the workplace, all these things, they're all tests. All big tests. It's a huge test. Someone says there are those who have to get reaction out of others. Yeah. Yeah. Some people say things just to see how you're going to react. Yeah. It's also true. That's why I got to be on your toes. You don't, that's why sometimes, I learned this many years ago. How to answer, snappy questions, snappy answers. Someone says, I never use this line, but I think it's a great line. Someone will say, isn't circumcision barbaric? What's the answer? No, barbarians don't do it. Great line. Or why do women have to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen? I said, they can wear tennis shoes, wear sneakers. People say things just to say things. I would say if something said that's crude, or below the belt, doesn't mean you have to take it. It definitely doesn't mean that. You want to start up with him, you can. He's like, come on, it's disgusting, just shut up, whatever. You don't have to sit there and take it. It's a lot of times people say things just to say things. So I'll tell you a rule of thumb. I answer questions, first of all, when a question is asked, and when I feel I absolutely have to say something. If I don't have to say something, better not to. It's just not worth it. No one's going to listen anyway. Like someone said, life after death, give me a soundbite what that means. So you know what I said? I'll send you a link. That was it. If I would have spoke for 3 seconds, it would have stopped me. All right, I heard enough. Finished. You also have to know who you're talking to. Someone actually wants an answer, or they're just, you have to scrape away the question. Is it a question or is it not a question? If it's not a question, you don't have to answer. But people make disgusting comments, say, yeah, I think things should be said. Where it goes, or just ignore it. If you can't ignore it, then you might have to say something. Right? Like I said, I learned that the hard way. The very hard way. It took me a while to learn this. Everyone should learn it straight away. You don't always have to answer. Most times you don't have to answer, and if you do answer, it's not worth it. Yeah, pick your battles. That's what I would say. That's the easiest thing, right? You pick your battles because most things people have the attention span like a doorknob. It used to be 6 minutes. It's certainly a lot less than that. Today because of commercials, so it's not even worth it. You won't even get something out of your mouth before you already get slammed for saying anything. So what's the point? So I will answer things that people ask, in a very quick manner, or I just brush it off. If I feel I have to answer something, I'll answer it. Yeah. But most times, and this is very hard for me, as most people can probably imagine. Yeah, it's very hard for me to keep my mouth shut when I hear stupid things. Very hard. It's a few years ago, some people were talking and it was about living Democratic state, blue, Democrats against Republicans, this and that. And I was like ready to pounce. I was like all set. I was like all set. And I was like, don't even open your mouth. Just move on. Just don't say anything. Just move on. It's not, and they were right. There was no point. There was no point. I was dying. I was like seething. I was like, come on, let me just say something. Something. Let me get one line it now. They were right. There's no point. There's absolutely no point. So if I would say if you want, you just go like this, yap, yap, yap. That's what people do. They got nothing better to do. Sticks and stones. Let people talk. And I think you're this, and I think you're that. Okay. And I think you're that. They didn't ask a question. They said, I think this. So what? Okay. Free country. Think what you want. Answer what you need to. Everything does not need an answer. Everything does not need a comeback. Yeah. Sometimes I think it does, but it's not worth it. I can tell you, in the last number of years, something came up. I think one thing, I stuck my foot down. That was it. I could have said other things. Just let it go. You let it ride. Not worth it. Nothing good's gonna come out of it. It's the opposite. You're gonna look like the bad guy, and that's it. And after a while, sometimes, depends what type of mood I'm in. I'll say, come on, that's really the best you got. That's the best you got to show me. That's it. Come on, I thought we had something better than that. Keeps them off balance a little bit. But most of these things go nowhere, and it's a waste of time, and it's a waste of energy. Better things left unsaid. I remember when I used to go to the States, someone would tell me before I went, just do one thing, just keep your mouth shut. I said, okay, we'll try. Hard for me, very hard, but whatever. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder, sometimes you just want to explode, and sometimes you just got to walk away. Sometimes you just have to walk away. That's it. And nothing to do because, you hear stupidity enough times. You hear it once, twice, whatever. When the person comes back like the third, fifth, seventh, eighth, 10th time, like you get tired of it. Can you put a person in their place? Should you? Probably. At that point. I wouldn't say the first second time. Once it becomes, starts going on and gets monotonous, then I'm like, no one needs to be a punching bag. I don't think anyone enjoys being a punching bag. But like I said, I learned the hard way. And I'm very good today. Very, very good. Ecstatic, actually. I get an A plus. I get an A plus because I just don't speak. It's just easier. Other people say what they want and whatever. If I feel I have to interject, I will. Which most times is not the case. Unless I feel I need to. It's just better that way because they're not going to get it anyway. There's no point. It's going to create animosity. Again, which I'm very good at. So, it's just better to stay away. All right. I do this every Sunday back on a regular basis now. I'm going to stop here. I do this every Sunday. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook. I'm Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos and Q&As. Ethics of Our Fathers. Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com, whichever good.